So the first bill is, obviously, we're talking about Old Town Carnival and Old Town Carnival Week, but Hastings used to have two carnivals, and there's a story behind that as to how that happened, and obviously then what happened to the Newtown Carnival.
Yeah, yes. Okay, so we start from the beginning of the Hastings Carnival, as it was called. And I was on the committee at the time. I've been asked to go on the committee because I've been connected with the revellers earlier on. I'll go back to that later on. So the Hastings Carnival was quite a popular carnival because it was started after the war to get the town cracking again. It was quite well supported at the time by the Rotary Club and the Hastings Round Table and a lot of local businesses. So it flourished. Unfortunately, though, over the years, commercial advertising crept in to a large extent. And what happened was the public was not too enthusiastic with seeing the same advertising float, a national advertising float, come round the carnival 2 or 3 years later. The lack of interest in that gradually led to the losing basically of crowds. Also, the hard work, as you all know, connected with carnivals was beginning to get a bit too much for some of the people taking part, organising it. We had a very good committee at the time, though. We had a police superintendent, the borough engineer, Charles Cowling, and it was a flourishing carnival at the time. The only trouble was, to my opinion, was the routes were rather long.
Yes.
We had various choices of starts and finishes. One was Alexandra Park, two was Grosvenor Gardens, Warrior Square, and I think Station Approaches at one time and Baybrook Road. All these were start points of the carnival, finishing either at Grosvenor Gardens, Warrior Square. So there was a general angle of a lot of various venues that were tried. So it wasn't for the want of trying. However, gradually the commercial advertising led to lack of support by the crowds. There was no comedy in the carnival. It was just commercial. And so when the Old Town Carnival started, one of the first things they said was no commercial advertising.
Right.
Which, to a large extent, has been kept going. We didn't mind social clubs from various big firms putting their social club and mentioning the firm, but no blatant commercial advertising, which seemed to be a success. So that was one of the reasons. So gradually over the years, the carnival deteriorated, the crowds deteriorated, the funds deteriorated, and the ability of people to want to work for the Hastings Carnival deteriorated slightly. At the same time, they discussed the route and decided to turn the carnival, which normally started on the St Leonard side, went round past the memorial to the fish market. All of a sudden, the committee decided that they would no longer include the fish market on the route. So they turned at the memorial, completely segregating the Old Town. The Old Town was completely left out of the carnival route. And seeing that a number of organisations in the Old Town, including the Winkle Club, were participants in the Hastings Carnival and provided entertainment and fun, which a carnival should do, they were left out. So there was quite a protest within the Old Town. And as we all know, one of the big things for getting crowd enthusiasm is protests. We've seen a lot of it just lately.
Yeah.
So the protests from the Old Town said, here, they're leaving us out. We'd do a damn carnival of our own. And put two fingers up basically to the Hastings organisation. I don't think at the time the Hastings Carnival thought that the Old Town Carnival would succeed. But however, gradually, having started out a protest, and I'll come back a little bit to that later, gradually the carnival was deteriorating and the Old Town Carnival had been born. When the Old Town Carnival was born, it was, as I say, just out of protest, and everybody said, we'll do our own carnival. The result was a committee was formed, which I was invited to stand on, being in two camps at once, more or less. And it was rather difficult, but however.
So you were hunting with the horses and running with the hounds. I didn't realise that.
Yes. So anyway, the Old Town Carnival started, and we met in the Fisherman's Club, and then the various people from the Old Town discussed what we do and how we do it. First of all came where are we going to get money from? We had no money at all. And so various businessmen said, we'll chip in, which was very good. And the next thing that happened, someone suggested, well, we need a band for a carnival. So someone said, what sort of band should we have? So Stan Barry piped up, there's only one band in the British Isles, and that's the Royal Marines. In those days, the Royal Marines cost about £400 or £500, which is unbelievable cost now. You think of nearly £8,000 or £10,000. So anyway, someone said, the Royal Marines. He said, the Royal Marines. So the next thing, we said, well, we can't afford them. One of the businessmen popped up and said, yes, you can. It's a check. Get the Royal Marines. Imagine starting a carnival sort of 2 months ahead and someone says, we'll give you the best band in the country to lead it. The printers in the Old Town, Guy and Jones, printed programs, and the next minute, the Old Town Carnival was formed. So that's how the Old Town Carnival started. I don't think there's anything more I can say about the reasons for the Hastings Carnival folded, but at the time, the Hastings Carnival was running as well as the Old Town Carnival for about 3 years, I think. The Old Town Carnival was running parallel to the Hastings Carnival. Gradually, the popularity of the Old Town Carnival superseded the Hastings Carnival, and eventually it folded up for lack of support. So that was the end of the carnival.
Yes, I used to watch the Hastings one from bottom of Elphinstone Road at the Park Gates, because they used to turn round at that point.
Yes.
So
back to the park.
Yeah, that's right. I used to enjoy that. But I think you're right. I mean, it was all obviously big lorries, and that's something I'd like to come back to later. And then I changed to watching it on the seafront along by St. Leonard's, and I just from hearing you speak and kind of remembering, it's a much more distant thing to watch than when I used to stand outside the Stag, and you're much closer to the floats in the Old Town.
I don't think the Hastings Carnival ever went through the actual Old Town. It always turned at the
the
fish
Iceland.
market.
Yes, but I was thinking, but because I was a spectator in those days, I was obviously smaller. I now think that was a more distant thing.
Yes.
You get closer to it in the Old Town. When the Old Town one started, you get closer to the people walking by in their costumes.
Yes, there's no doubt about it. There was quite big crowds when you consider the council in those days had deck chairs more or less from the bathing pool along past Warrior Square to the pier, 2 rows of deck chairs for the crowds to watch the carnival.
Yes.
Can you imagine that nowadays?
Yes. Yes.
So that was the strength of support for the carnival.
Yes.
And having taken part in both, I know what it was like.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. So not only did you not only were you on the organising committees of both of them, you're absolutely right when you said about taking part, because a lot of friends, I'm thinking of Rosemary, for example, talking about going up with the guides and making things. So how did you then end up being, the pair of you, being the creators of these massive floats?
Well, it all started a very long time ago in Priory Street, where we had our headquarters. We had the cellars underneath, which is now the Saga building. On the Scout Hall wall was a picture of a carnival float, which the Scouts had made in the 1930s, a big prehistoric monster. When I finished my national service, I'd been connected with the carnival before that with the Revellers. I'd better start with the Revellers. The Revellers was my introduction to the carnival. Johnny Woodham's one of the famous people from the theatre, the White Rock Theatre, an actor and a marvellous person connected with the theatre business in Hastings, formed the Revellers, whose sole object was to raise money for the Hastings Carnival. We had a makeshift band comprising of some good musicians and some very bad ones, and our sole object was to raise money for the Hastings Carnival throughout the year.
Right.
As I say, we had our own band and very unorthodox methods of raising money. One of them was to close the A21 at the Harrow to the traffic and get everybody to buy immunity badges. Imagine trying to stop the A21 nowadays. As well as that, we visited all the functions, the big dinners and balls in the town, and there was quite a thriving tourist industry and business industry in the town with hotels, the Queen's especially. And we gate crashed all those functions to raise money for charity, complete with our band. Imagine sitting down to dinner and then you heard a huge racket outside. It came the Revellers with their collection boxes and made such a shindy that the people paid very good money to get rid of us. Johnny Woodham was such a good organiser and connected with the White Rock that the White Rock Theatre wasn't immune from our visits. And what used to happen, Johnny Woodham's found a show that was going on and arranged with the theatre manager an absolute spot-on timing event, so that during the interval we had assembled in the White Rock. As soon as the interval curtain went down, we burst in like the crazy gang, marched around the place with our band and our collection boxes and created merry hell for about 5 minutes and then disappeared off the scene, having collected quite a lot of money.
Brilliant. Keith, I'm hoping you're listening to these ideas. Yes, I think. What did you play, Bill?
The Revellers were an ideal protest thing for young people. They carried on for many years, but unfortunately, gradually, as people got older, they died out. With more or less the death of Hastings Carnival, they disappeared. So that was one of the things. So that was my introduction. After finishing national service, we decided to build this float of the prehistoric monster that was on our Scout Hall wall. It was done with pioneering poles, recovered from the woods out where I live now at the moment, Three Oaks. A friendly farmer decided to give us some poles. So we had them, he cut them down for us, wet carts, and took them all the way to Priory Street to make the prehistoric monster that we entered in the 1950s. After that, the Scouts decided to produce several more floats. We borrowed bomb trolleys, which were supplied by the local timber firm, who had them after the war. If you see pictures of aircraft taking off, loading up with bombs, these trolleys carried about 5 ton in weight and were ideal for building floats on because they were low and very, very strong.
Wow.
We borrowed those from the local timber merchant. The advantage was that they had a handle which went down and break the trolley, but we could build a very big trolley. One of the notable ones was a scout badge celebrating the 50 years of scouting. There's a picture somewhere of me with it. And the kangaroo, which Dudley Trow, one of the Bonfire Boys, was part as a junior in, and we built a huge kangaroo. The year that we did the kangaroo, we sat in the Scout Hall, and we couldn't think of a theme because the theme that year was leap year. And
Brilliant.
And our Scoutmaster turned around, put his pipe down and said, well, why not do a kangaroo? So we decided to do a kangaroo. And of course, in those days, the Scouts were clued up on pioneering poles and lashings. So the poles were used again to make a kangaroo. Improvisation was the watchword in those days. We had no money to do anything. And the kangaroo comprised of a pioneering structure, about 14 or 16 foot high, covered in rusty chicken wire netting that we'd scrounged from a farm on the ridge, and covered in turned around fertilizer bags, painted with brown distemper. The kangaroo won best in the show because it was right on the theme.
Yes.
Also beat one of the local big television firms, Colster Branch, who spent hundreds of pounds on their float. We spent about £25 or £20 at the very most.
Wow.
The most notorious float that we had, the Rocket.
Now, I'm going to ask you about the Rocket because I know I love this story. So, yes, we need the full infamous Rocket story.
The Rocket was built along near Skinner's Sheds, where the old tram depot was at one time. And the Rocket was about 30 foot long, mounted on a Ford 10 weight van, which we cut in halves and extended by 20 feet on the chassis. So in other words, the Ford van that should be 15 feet turned out to be 25 feet long. We mounted a Rocket on it, and it was covered in bituminous paper, and on the back of it had some elongated oil drums, big oil drums to simulate the actual rocket motors. I had made some chemicals on Hessian to put in the rockets so that when we got to the judging, we could light them and the rockets smoked. The judging was at Grosvenor Gardens. We turned up with this huge rocket, all dressed as spacemen. I think the theme was adventure or space anyway. We based it on the theme. The rocket, when we got to the judging site at Grosvenor Gardens, we put the chemicals in it and it started smoking. It looked very realistic, smoke pouring out. The judges couldn't avoid giving us best in the show. As we started off, the smoke diminished. The Scouts got a bit impatient and I said, whatever you do, don't put too much in the drums. But gradually they didn't believe what I said and added a lot more than they should have done. So when we got to Marine Court, the rocket was really smoking. It was really looking like it was just going. The crowd were enthusiastic. When we got to Warrior Square, all of a sudden there was a flash and the whole thing burst into flames, complete. Of course, being made of bituminous paper, it was like a Zeppelin burning on the front. We didn't realize at the time that there was sediment of oil in the oil drums, and the result was that when we heated it up with too much stuff, it burnt. The Daily Express newspaper correspondent was down there on holiday, leaned out the window and took a picture, and we had the only time that a carnival float in Hastings has ever got the front page of the Nationals, and we got a big picture of Scout disaster, rocket disaster at Carnival. And there's a picture. The result was that the fire, after we put it out, burnt the tyres off the extended Ford, so we had bare rims. Having put the fire out and with the smouldering wreckage, we carried on with the tow ropes, and Scouts pulled it past the saluting base, which was at the pier with the White Rock Steps. The people who were on the judging position thought how the hell did that not get best in show with the smoke and smoke? And all I had was a loud hailer, and said that we burnt up our entry. Good job. So that was kind of wonderful, really.
Brilliant. What year was that, Bill?
About 58, something like that. After that, that was the last Scout one I did, because our Scout troop was soon disbanded because we lost our hall in Priory Street to the church hall. They sold it and it became a bingo hall. The cellars where we met eventually became a nightclub. I think it was called Denny's, or Denny's, I think it was the nightclub in the basement. That was where we had our headquarters. So from then, I was working, Benny said, well, why don't you help my guys? So immediately we transferred to the guys and produced a carnival float in about 3 weeks. And we had a red post office van, and we did exactly the same. So we produced another float, which won Best in the Show, based on adventure depicting the guide chalet at Ardlebode.
Best in class, not best in
Best
show.
in class, Ardlebode. The next year we did the guide anniversary of their Jubilee. So we did a big birthday cake with a map of Great Britain on. When we built the first one at Grosvenor Gardens, when we were assembled, we heard a light plane coming along with its engine spluttering, and the next thing it had ditched in the sea opposite the float. It had come nearly landed on the Carnival, but it ditched in the sea, just in about 6 or 8 foot of water. And luckily the lifeboat and the Coast Guards were there in the Carnival in force. A big rope was organised, the crew were rescued, and then a tug-of-war team was organised, attached to the aircraft, and the rumour had it that by the time the tug-of-war had finished pulling the aircraft out of the water, it had got caught on one of the groins, and they did more damage than the actual crash.
Oh no!
The Carnival started off a little bit later after the excitement, but it was quite an exciting thing to see the aircraft coming in and gradually losing height and thinking, blimey, where's that going to finish? So,
my God.
So having done the guides in the Hastings Carnival, we also were doing a floating, we did the Ra, Thor Heidel's Ra, which was more or less a scale model of the straw papyrus reed boat that he crossed the Pacific in way back. So that got us another Best in Show. So we carried on. When the Old Town Carnival started, we produced a 40-foot whale. That was quite a star of the show, got us best in its class. And the peculiar thing was, a week later, I was drinking in the sun, and one of the local fishermen, Ted Tyrrell, came up and said, "Hi, Bill, you know that damn whale you built?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you realise you got the flukes around the wrong way?" I said, "What?" He said, "Yes." He said, "You got it looking like a mackerel." He said, "The fluke should be flat." Nobody had noticed it in the Old Town. In the whale itself, we had two 40-gallon drums filled up with water with 2 stirrup pumps, and my son and his friend were in there. And when from the tractor, Benny and I shouted, "There she blows," they pumped the water. 2 40-gallon drums full of water around the crowd. Nobody protested a bit.
I'm not surprised you've kept winning with all these floats.
Actually, because the guides won 2 Best in Show in the first Old Town Carnival, there was a little bit of resentment built up, or rivalry, and it led to the fact that the Fisherman's Club and some of the other organisations built some wonderful floats. In the history that I did, I've mentioned them all, so I can't mention them now, but I can later on. One of the more telling floats we built for the guides again was a Hastings trawler based on the year, that year was 1972. We depicted a trawler in 1872 hauling up its nets, absolutely brimming with fish. We did 1972 with half fish and half plastics, and we predicted 2072 with a whole mass of plastic. We were miles ahead of our time in our theme, and unfortunately it's coming to fruition, really.
Oh, it so is, yes.
It's a little bit of a worrying thought when you look at it, but it was funny we did it. The trawler was more or less the same size as a Hastings trawler, and built, I think that was on an ordinary low loading trailer. We carried on, and later on, the great rivals was Bob Morgan with his famous trains.
Yes.
They took the show. He took them to Jersey and various places around the country, and they were a credit to the town.
Absolutely.
We later on did the Albertine, which was one of the best ones we ever did, more or less a full-size boat, again on a trailer of the pleasure boat that left from the opposite the Queen's Hotel there. And it was marvellous because we had, the sails were made of mosquito netting from Malcolm Mitchell's, the local government contractor, and so that we could do a complete set of sails and the wind didn't offer any resistance, but we had the effect of the sails. So that was a good one. And then we finished up with another very good guide float. That was for the Hastings Motorboat and Yacht Club. We did two more, Rock and All Roger, a giant octopus, and also Fantasy Island, which we based our, later on we based the Winkle Club Fantasy Island on, from the boat club. And also one of the best pedestrian entries ever done was for the Golden Jubilee, the Golden Coach with all pedestrians. It's the only time that Bestin's show was won by a pedestrian entry.
Oh, I didn't know that. You've told us about some of the most memorable floats, talked about scout floats, then moving across to guide floats, having started off with revelers floats into that there. So I know that last year you still won Best in Show. That's a so Winkle Club.
My connection with the Winkle Club float, or
yes, with the floats, because for another occasion, I think we've got a whole separate series, I think, on you and Winkle Club, haven't we? But so I know that to bring us right up to date, 2019, you won last year with the Winkle Club float in the most atrocious weather.
yes, it was rather boisterous to say the least. Yes, sketches. Well, we decided to enter the carnival this year because it was the 50th anniversary of the Old Town Carnival, and to commemorate the fact that the first one, Benny and I were together and did it, and so this year Benny did quite a lot of the work. Anyway, the result was typical of the organisation. We drew it on the back of a cigarette packet, really wonderful sketches, and again, to convince, it's the first time that I'd done one for the Winkle Club. And so the Winkle Club, we were very enthusiastic, and they got together, and in spite of my sketchy drawings, managed to get something like a scale. And very often it's a question of putting a piece of wood up and saying that looks about right, and then taking it down again. The result was that we decided to this time borrow a very big boat trailer from Rye Harbour Marine, who were very kind. They lent us a big trailer free of charge, and we had to go over and collect it, which was quite a job in the first place. Anyway, having got the trailer into the garden just about, we set about building it. And if you imagine on our front lawn, we had at one time a 12-foot long champagne bottle, and the beginning of the backdrop and everything like that. And gradually it went together. And so we produced the Winkle Club float. It had a champagne bottle dripping allegedly water into a pool with two old people looking at it. And the theme of the carnival was
Off with the old,
out with the
Oh
old.
yes, it was. That was the thing.
Out
Yes.
with the old. But we added a little bit, but the future is up to you. So we
Yes.
basically combined the two sides of the story, with an old couple looking at the water coming out of the champagne, sitting in tranquility of the garden, where behind the wall was a huge screen with some youngsters sitting down on a flow of a couch, looking at a screen with all visual aids on their heads. In other words, sitting there doing precisely nothing. At the back of the thing, we had Save Our Planet, Plant a Tree. And also we had wind turbines on the back of that, and a pile of rubbish that the people had more or less sat.
Yes.
One of the other slogans, which caused quite a lot of interest, was 2 imitation tombstones with "In loving memory of Harold Place toilets, rest in P." Which again was a bit of a subtle hint to one or two people. Probably means that I shan't be in the New Year's honours.
Yeah, well, quite well. We all missed those toilets, and I couldn't believe how quickly they got demolished. I mean, no sight of them at all now. Yeah.
The peculiar thing, having been used to building floats, we assembled a rock and roll boat club at my boat club, but the wind was so strong I'd picked boxes of dahlias, prize blooms to decorate it with, and unfortunately the blooms, as soon as we tied them to the thing, blew away, so they probably finished up at Dungeness. But anyway, we got to the assembly point, which was Rockanour, and we decided to pull in beside the Coast Guard station so that we had a maximum shelter before we entered the carnival. And although the wind was strong, it was forecast to decrease slightly in the west, so we knew that we weren't on too bad. All the time we were heading into it, the main danger was going broadside onto it when we rounded the fountain, so we didn't worry too much about that. But the amazing thing was, we'd got it assembled and I was just doing the finishing touches under quite a bit of pressure. And a young lady's police sergeant came up to me and said, "We're thinking of taking your float out because of the wind." I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Well, the bottle's resting on the trestle." I said, "The trestle is 4x2 building joists." I said, "If you break that, if the wind breaks that," I said, "you'll be having to pick cars out of the sea at Rockanour, so don't worry about us, we're all right."
Absolutely, absolutely. And you've also reminded me that I know your lovely flowers have decorated Happy Harold. And are those your flowers on the windowsill behind you?
Yes. It's not such a good year because this year we grow flowers and vegetables for the Women's Institute, and of course, because of the virus, everything is closed down. And we're in serious worries about whether the market will ever carry on again, because one of the stipulations that the Women's Institute organisation have put is that no people over 70 are allowed to take part in it, which is going to be very threatening. However, things may improve, so we live in hope. That's all we can do.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of people worse off than we, so we're lucky in some ways.
Yeah, and yes, and definitely coping in 2020 is something, and the future. You've mentioned both of those things. You know, is something I want to ask you in a minute. But before we get there, they kind of round off that that journey, in that time, you also have become the president of the Carnival Association.
Yes.
So can you tell us how that happened, when that happened, and what that means, and how obviously, and then obviously Old Town Carnival Week itself developed around that too.
Yes. Well, the carnival, as I say, came about by protest and enthusiasm with the Old Town. You wouldn't have got anything done without the enthusiasm. People rolled up their sleeves, and every time you wanted anything, they did. I've become president after the passing of Bab Muggeridge, who took part in all of the carnivals. Her daughter was a carnival queen, and also she organised everything. She was the grandmother of carnivals in some ways, doing everything. Well, when she passed on, I was asked to become vice president, which I did, accepted, and I'm very proud of the fact that I've been connected. I like to think that I'm a hands-on person who, when I see a float, I don't only look at the float, I know the work that's gone in. I know the hours of time that has to be spent. I know the financial angles, which is very telling nowadays. In my early days of building carnival floats, we were notorious at scrounging, improvising, which is unfortunately, when you see the amount of materials that are tipped, youth organisations and bodies could produce carnival floats cheaply and reasonably. It's time. Time is the important factor in today's life. Nobody seems to have time to do anything, and the result is that you don't get the people willing to give time to produce something, to provide entertainment or something else. So I've done my best to encourage a number of people to take part in carnivals, but also to realise that building floats can be great fun.
Yes.
You have the difficulties, but it does unite people. When you're all together with a paintbrush, at one turn there we were building a float, and the head postmaster of Hastings at the time, whose wife was the guide district commissioner, was slapping paint, and someone mistook the effigy that we were building and gave him a bit of a coat of paint to show with a smoking hole. We all burst out laughing.
Not that long ago, you were still cycling up Crown Lane in the bike race.
Yes, I managed to do that when I was about 80, I think.
84.
84.
Fine effort. You're doing well till you got pushed. Well done, Bill. Breathe on enough, Bill.
Red jacket that you wear, and you lead the dignitaries now in the carnival with your lobster hats on your face. So yes, don't you dare think about retiring. You get so much there. Well, that's been absolutely brilliant. Is there anything that you think, why haven't we spoken about? Is there any final thoughts that you want to add?
At the end of it, I'd like to thank all the committees, not just this year's committee, last year's committee, the committees over the years that have kept the Old Town Carnival going. Our new committee here this year is no different. They've put a hell of a lot of work into it. Unfortunately, we can't have a carnival, but thank you all for the hard work that you put in. And let's hope that next year we renew our energies. We're rather like a tree that has been pruned. It looks a bit bare
Yes.
first year, but the next year it should bear fruit. So we hope we're all around to see it. So look
Ab-
after yourselves, and we'll see you when we do.
Thank you. And thank you to both of you for the decades of enthusiasm and the training that you have given to so many generations in, as you say, in maintaining that tradition. And let's hope for the next generations to come it will flourish. Once it's being pruned, it'll come back, yes, twice as good.
Okay then, thanks
Right.
very
Well,
much.
thank you. And
Bye.
hopefully see you in person very soon. All the best.